Welcome to the training program of Boosting Positive Narrative on Romani Integration through Arts. The aim of this program is to present the stand design and build art integrated learning model to teachers based on the experience gathered during its implementation in France. This corresponds to the third lesson entitled Handling of Technique. This lesson established the artistic techniques to be used based on participants' competences that allow representing their imagination on vision of reality in terms of the workshop topic. During the second exercise entitled Sketch is an outline of something, you must first understand the full extent of Roma community in your community, and based on their stories, finally set intentions for the results you all hope to achieve by sharing their stories as a whole. Remember, the power of a story is also in creating a shared point of connection, something concrete that everyone involved can share, respond to, and develop. However, this story also needs to consider the audience, but we are going to talk about that later on. Previously, it has been described what does it mean cultural identity. Now, in this first part of the lesson, we are going to discuss shortly about collective identity. To a lesser or a greater extent, each person is part of a community. We are part of our family or group of friends, town or city, region of birth, professional category, and many more. The sense of belonging to each of these forms is part of our identity, and identity highly influenced by social aspects. Collective identity is defined as the feeling of belonging to a certain community. It arises from the cultural and affective links that occur within the community, since they are human environments in which a series of visions or ideals are shared and defended, which permeate the individual identity of each member of the group. Thus, as they all share to a greater or lesser extent the same traits and feel linked to them, they have a common feeling of belonging. Collective identity implies the self-perception of a we in group, a group of people who share a series of traits, as opposed to the others out group who have different traits. The importance given to one's own traits and those of the outgroup is very subjective, as well as being subjective as the way in which certain symbols or traits are selected that delimit the group's own identity, such as race, nationality, language, religion, ideology, and so on. To generate a feeling of community, that is, to achieve a link between the identity of the person with that of a group, the person must have three characteristics. Perceive belonging to the group. Be aware that because you belong to that group, you're assigned a positive or negative qualifier. Feel a certain affection derived from the consciousness of belonging to a group. Although the expression collective identity is used very frequently, on many occasions it is used as a synonym for ethnic culture and seen as something that should be professed yes or yes. Remember, the idea of this workshop is also to build a community sense, if there isn't, since the objective is to develop objects that represent a particular cultural identity as Roma community. Therefore, it is important to keep in mind the importance of creating a group identity through this lesson and the following sessions of the workshop. Since this can be done by group identity dynamics, let's now move to talk about group identity dynamics. Group identity dynamics are methods that are used in groups to achieve a certain objective. In other words, they are activities that bring benefits because they allow learning in a dynamic and funny way by interacting with other people. Group identity dynamics can be carried out in groups of any age, from children and adolescents, in schools and institutes, to young people and adults in universities and companies. The objectives of these dynamics might vary depending on the purpose they wish to give it, but the most fundamental thing is that through these activities, group cohesion is fostered while knowledge is sustained and the personal relationship between the people who make up the group is improved. Each of the group identity dynamics has an objective, and that is why they all leave a lesson and a reflection. In this sense, the people who participate in this type of activity, either through a workshop, school, or work, they end up learning something new about themselves or their peers. But not only this, also the dynamic of group identity creates a fun and harmonious environment that encourages people to participate and socialize, even allowing them to make new friends in the process. When carrying out group identity dynamics, it is important to remember that not all activities can be the same for all groups, which leads to the fact that you have to adapt the dynamics that you want to carry out, depending on the group with which you are going to work. Because the goal to be achieved in a primary school group, for example, is not the same as the one that you want to achieve with a group of adults in a work environment. For this workshop, SBAIL, the objective was to work with different range of ages, but mostly focusing on adults. So the activities were adapted to this target group. Please be sure that each of the dynamic activities that you will choose are oriented to your target group in order to fully try to develop their competences and basically to get to know each other in an interesting way. And please remember, the key aspect is that the dynamics of group identity create a fun and harmonious environment that encourages people to participate and socialize. And the SBAIL workshop is looking for this aspect. Now that you have in mind the importance of a collective identity for this workshop, let's move to the second important aspect, the construction of the narrative. In the stand design and build art lesson, it has been explained the methodology to create a visual narrative art for a positive narrative on Roma community integration, starting from a single perspective to an individual identity to group identity within a social context. Now, you might think that the art of storytelling is difficult and complex, that only professional skilled people can achieve. Nevertheless, it could not be further from the truth. The ability to tell a story can be learned through practice, and with the right tips, anyone can become a master storyteller in visual narrative art. Visual narrative art includes scenes and or all the acts, episodes in a story using one or more illustrations via paintings, sculptures, photograph, physical movement, film, or other media beyond verbal reporting that creates a picture in the mind relating to events involving symbols, people, animals, and other objects within context relevant to the action in the story. The importance of creating visual narrative art for the stand design and build art comes from the principle that creating visual narrative art to parallel verbal, oral and written, narrative nurtures the processing of a concept to a greater extent and in ways that verbal narratives cannot achieve by themselves. In this line, Visual narrative art for this workshop can provide the means for awakening and fulfilling collective conscious of a group, in which creativity is the key, and it comes from the storyteller themselves. So trainers need to encourage learners to deeply think and exchange about what is their unique perspective on the situation. What do they consider not worth it? What is the lesson they want to pass along? Just think of how different two artworks will be. For example, one written by people who are outside of Roma community and see them settling in their communities, and the other written by Roma people who emphasize on the integration and the strengthening of their identity. Remember, the main focus of this module is to share and consult with participants the following three aspects. Find clarity on the story the group wants to share. Tap into their motivation to continue to know why they have to say it. And more importantly, is to learn how to best shape it to inspire and create a change. The exercise 2 sketch is an outline of something is an activity that starts to create a collective reflection on whether, like artists, they want to leave a testimony of the most important scenes of their lives. What kind of scenes will they record? What characters will they include? What objects will they capture? How they will put them together? This generates a process of exploration and reflection on their own environment, on their daily life, family customs, the everyday objects they use, life in their neighborhood, the streets, among other aspects, and so on. In order to facilitate the task of this activity, participants might be split in groups of 4 or 5 to encourage an exchange of ideas from everyone. We all have things to say and express, and sometimes we just need a safe environment and a friendly connection. Learners are not expected to be a good draftsman for the externalization of their emotions and sensations. In this sense, an effective way to help them overcome this fear and encourage them to create can be by showing them various works from different artists. They will get the message that art is not only painting well or making faithful copies of reality, but expressing ideas, true or feelings about some aspect of reality. This is incorporated in exercise 2. The expected process of exercise 2 is based on the exploration on exercise 1, but in exercise 2, learners are welcome to make a sketch of the different scenes of their daily life. Then they are being asked to show to the rest of the learners. The objective is to identify similarities and or differences in each experience. After that, they will be asked to put them together by a harmonization from a common perspective. This final sketch is the first draft of the concept idea behind the work they will do for exercise 3. Now, let's move on to give some guidelines. In the same sense, as a first introduction to stand design and build art, it is recommended to provide examples of the artists and their artworks before exercise 2 is implemented. Please consult the paper act of stand design and build art to see some more other examples. Additionally, it is recommended to invite to this session two artists to talk with them about their artworks and the message behind them. This will help learners to identify aspects from their timeline that they would like to highlight in artwork to position their identity in their social context. Also, it is recommended to allow participants to choose which is the kind of techniques that they would like to use for this exercise number 2. For example, in terms of the workshop at Ivry-sur-Seine, we have previously talked with the participants which type of material they wanted to use for this exercise. And based on their comments, all of them finally thought that it was going to be better if we keep it simple, but that the focus was more important into really providing some examples of what they like it. As a first step, to get comfortable with each other in expressing and drawing. Please note that it is good to remember at this point the principle of non-discrimination, which is related to the previous tip. All the artistic works that you will make from images, audios, gestures, scenery, stories, etc., must promote actions and attitudes that respect the image of people, physical integrity and physique, in the guarantee of the rights of the student population, regardless of differences based on gender, gender identity, sex, age, nationality, religion, spiritual belief, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, disease, language, culture, opinion, personal, familiar, social, any other circumstances, such as academic performance, abilities, skills, attitudes, or accessibility, especially abilities or disabilities. Really, this workshop is conceived as the platform to provide spaces to Roma community to express themselves and not to feel somehow discouraged by negative messages. Also, with Roma community, it might happen that some of the shared experiences and studies might have a negative meaning towards the society that is hosting them or receiving them. But the point of view, once again, is not to focalize on these negative aspects, but to send a message in a positive way, in a harmonious and friendly way, in order to position an idea. Now, it is clear that we need to keep in mind that last-minute adaptations to the dynamic steps might happen based on the participants' motivations. For example, in the workshop in Ivry-sur-Seine, we have prepared materials and we have provided to each of them individually in order for them to start to do phase one as if they have to do something by themselves, and then that there is an exchange, and then that they put together their designs. However, as we saw that there were some participants who were very shy and they didn't want to write by themselves or draw by themselves a specific object, they decided that as a group, they wanted to display all the drawings in a same document. And so that it was going to be more as a cooperation and as something that was not obligatory for everyone to do it if they don't want it. And so we have in this workshop people that were observing, others that were commenting, others that were drawing because of the comments that the other participants were telling. So actually it was a good way of every one of them expressing themselves, every one of them taking a role within the dynamic, and at the end we got an interesting result that gives the open space and floor for the next part, which was actually designing and building the concept of the artworks objects. Thank you for your attention to this lesson 3, handling of technique. This is the end of the lesson. Please, for more information, consult the art lesson and also the training of learners part of this workshop.